The mind is everything. What you think you become. Buddha. What if this isn't the first time you've heard these words? What if something inside you already knows, not just believes but remembers, that thought creates form, that nothing you've lived through has been separate from your consciousness? You didn't find this message. You answered it. And that's the difference. Because this moment, this very encounter, isn't a coincidence. It's a return. A turning of the spiral. A call you sent out long before your mind had the language to name it. You're not just here to listen. You're here to remember. It begins where it always begins, with the invisible. A thought, soft and ungraspable, forming like mist before the storm. You've felt it before, haven't you? The strange echo in your chest when something aligns too perfectly. The way a single phrase can feel like a homecoming. The knowing that arises without reason. The Hermetists called it mentalism. All is mind. The universe is mental. The first and most essential law. Not poetry. Not metaphor. Law. Just like gravity, just like time. Immutable, impersonal, undeniable. And if you're hearing it now, really hearing it, it means you're ready. Not to believe, but to see. There is no out there without in here. No circumstance untouched by your vibration. No reality that doesn't begin in the quiet soil of the unseen. Every relationship, every failure, every breakthrough, each is the harvest of seeds planted in thought, whether by intention or by habit. You are not a visitor to this world. You are embedded in its very code. And thought is the brush you've been holding all along. This isn't self-help. This is ancient physics. Long before microscopes and formulas, long before religion separated you from source, there was Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, the initiator of initiates, whispering what the priests buried in glyphs and the mystics passed in silence. That reality is not something that happens to you. It is something you are shaping with every breath. And the sooner you remember this, the sooner the dream begins to shift. But don't worry if part of you resists. That's natural. That's the layer built by forgetting. The voice that says, could that really be true? The voice that was trained to obey logic, that was told to fear imagination. It's not the enemy. It's the gatekeeper. You're not being asked to believe blindly. You're being invited to look again, to see the architecture beneath your experiences, the rhythm behind your chaos, the law beneath your longing, to ask, if my mind truly is the source, what have I been thinking into existence? What have I been vibrating beneath my words, beneath my doubts, beneath my hopes? What if I stopped trying to fix the world and started listening to what my world was reflecting back to me? Because everything reflects. That's the second whisper. But we're not there yet. First, you must understand the weight of a single thought. A single, consistent, emotionally charged thought is not a ripple, it's a current. It gathers. It draws. It sculpts the invisible into form. Not instantly, not as magic, but as law. The law of cause and effect doesn't begin with action. It begins with mind. And in the Hermetic teachings, thought is not separate from matter. Thought becomes matter in time. So what has your mind been rehearsing? What loops have you been silently running? What images has your inner cinema played on repeat while you've been too busy to watch? None of it is random. That's the illusion. Chance, they say, is simply an unrecognized law. And you, right now, are standing at the threshold of remembering. Because if all is mind, then your next thought is not just private. It's creative. And it's already reaching forward into your future. And so you breathe, not just to survive, but to anchor the next wave of thought into the field of form. Because thought alone is not enough. Not unless it moves, not unless it pulses. You were taught that thinking was passive, abstract. But that's not what the Hermetists knew. They knew the mind is vibration, that the unseen stirs with frequency, and that frequency shapes reality. Everything vibrates. That is the second law. You are not a body inside a world. You are a frequency within a field. And the quality of your thought determines the tone you emit, the signal you broadcast, the rhythm you invite. You've seen it. You've lived it. Those days when the world seems to mirror your mood, not in cliché, but in real, almost eerie synchronicity. The stranger who says the exact thing you needed to hear. the opportunity that appears just when you chose to believe, the tension that builds when fear becomes your only prayer. This isn't superstition. It's the subtle mechanics of existence. Because while your words speak to the surface, your vibration speaks to the code. And the universe is listening not to your declarations, but to your frequency. That's why you can say, I am abundant, and still feel lack. And reality will respond to the lack. Because it's not the phrase that creates, it's the vibration behind it. You cannot deceive the field. You can only align with it, which means the work isn't to affirm blindly. It's to excavate, to listen inward, to notice what's humming beneath your silence. The thoughts you think habitually become the vibrations you carry. And those vibrations, they're not passive. They are instructions. Sentences written in the fabric of time, shaping how the next moment will form around you. You've always been speaking, even when you're quiet. And now, maybe for the first time, you're starting to listen. So ask yourself, without judgment, what is your mind rehearsing when no one's watching? What emotion lingers beneath your breath? Is it trust? Or tension? Gratitude? Or grasping? Because the universe does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are. And what you are is the echo of your most consistent thoughts, wrapped in emotion, pulsing in rhythm. You are not a victim of thought. You are its master if you choose to be. But mastery isn't a switch. It's a remembrance. And remembrance begins with stillness, not the absence of sound, the presence of awareness. When the surface quiets, the deeper current rises. And in that current lives your true voice. Not the voice shaped by fear or repetition, but the voice that speaks from the center of who you are. That voice does not shout. It does not argue. It vibrates. It is the frequency of your soul, uninterrupted. And when that voice aligns with your thought, when the image in your mind harmonizes with the resonance in your being, then you are no longer thinking about reality. You are transmitting it. That's when creation begins to feel like remembering, like returning to something you never really lost. You start to realize that the future is not out there waiting. It's in here vibrating. And your task is not to force it, but to tune to it. So, what station has your soul been dialing in? What music have you been vibrating into the silence? Because the universe has been listening all along. You can feel it now, can't you? The subtle movement behind each thought. Not just an idea, but a shift. A flicker in the unseen. As if something begins to respond the moment your inner gaze sharpens. As if the world itself leans in when you finally stop resisting and start aligning. This is the mystery Hermes guarded not in riddles, but in resonance. He didn't need temples. His altar was the space between thoughts. His initiation was not a ritual, but a remembering. Thrice great, they called him. Not for power, but for integration, body, mind, and spirit vibrating in union. He was not a man. He was a frequency. A bridge between dimensions, a symbol of what awakens when a human becomes aligned with divine order. And from his silence was born the Kybalion, not written but distilled, not authored, but transmitted, through those who had ears to hear, eyes to see, hearts ready to vibrate with truth. And the first principle was always the same. All is mind. This isn't philosophy. This is architecture. You live inside a thought. Not just any thought, but the thought of the all, the supreme consciousness, the source from which all vibration emanates. In the East, they called it Mahat. In the mysteries, the nous. In Hermeticism, the all. But the names don't matter. The vibration does. Because this all is not a distant deity. It is the field in which you move, and the field that moves through you. You are not separated from the divine by space or worth. You are a modulation of its frequency. A fractal of the one mind. And what does that mean? It means everything you perceive, every face, every fear, every flower, is thought, projected into density, held together by vibration, shaped by rhythm, refined through polarity. There is no out there, only reflections of in here, as within so without, as above so below. These are not slogans, they are keys. And now the lock begins to turn. Because once you accept that you live in a mental universe, the question changes. No longer, why is this happening to me? But what thought gave rise to this? No longer, how do I change the outer? But what must I transmute within? And here the terrain deepens, because not all thoughts are conscious. Some were inherited, programmed, etched into your psyche before you could form language. And yet they still vibrate, still echo, still create. The Hermetists never separated thought from emotion, or emotion from vibration. They knew that what lives in your subconscious is just as potent, perhaps more so, than what you declare aloud. So when your life feels stuck, chaotic, or unaligned, it is not punishment. It is revelation. It is showing you where your mind is still fractured, where your vibration is still looping in forgotten patterns. And this is where the real work begins. The work of inner alchemy. Not to resist what arises, but to witness it, to feel it, to trace it back to the first thought, the root vibration, the origin of the distortion. Because once seen, it begins to shift, like light entering a locked room, like sound entering silence. This is not magic. This is law. Mentalism is not about controlling the world with your mind. It's about understanding that you already are, whether you know it or not. So what happens when you do know? When you choose your thoughts not from fear, but from alignment. When you feel a new vibration begin to hum beneath your skin, soft but steady, something begins to organize. Coherence, a resonance, a gravitational field that pulls experience toward you not by force, but by correspondence. And you begin to realize you were never meant to chase your life. You were meant to remember it and then transmit it. Because transmission doesn't begin with volume. It begins with clarity, with stillness, with alignment so clean it becomes irresistible, not to people, not to outcomes, but to the very structure of existence. You start to notice how reality shifts not when you try harder, but when you become more coherent. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to vibrate on the same chord. That is when creation flows. That is when what once seemed impossible becomes obvious, inevitable, quietly magnetic, and you no longer wonder how it will happen. You start asking how long you've been resisting what was already yours. This is the work of the initiate, not to force, not to command, but to attune, to listen inward until the distortion falls away and only truth remains. Because thought without awareness is noise, but thought aligned with soul, that is design. That is architecture. That is sacred geometry in motion. That is how pyramids rise, how cities breathe, how timelines bend. You've done it before in lives you no longer recall. Not with your mind, but with your bones, with your gaze, with the vibrational blueprint you've always carried, just beneath the surface of forgetting. And now it's reactivating. That ache you felt, the one that says this life isn't all there is, it wasn't doubt. It was signal, a pulse from a deeper frequency calling you home. Because this isn't the first time you've walked this path. It's just the first time you're doing it awake. And here's where it gets beautiful. When you remember that all is mind, you stop being afraid of the chaos. You begin to read it, because even disorder follows a pattern. Even confusion speaks in vibration. And the Hermetists knew, the outer world is a glyph, a mirror, a cipher. It's not random, it's reflective. So when a door closes, it is not punishment. It is a punctuation mark in a sentence you wrote. When a person leaves, it is not loss. It is the dissolving of a vibration no longer in resonance. When a dream dissolves, it is not failure, it is evolution. A retuning, a deeper layer of your design unfolding. And the more you witness this, really witness, the more life begins to speak back. Not in thunder, but in subtlety, in rhythm, in synchronicity. And you start to understand what mystics have whispered for centuries. That life is not happening to you. It's happening through you. And even more, it's happening as you. So what happens when you treat every thought as sacred? When you cradle each belief like a seed, knowing it will root somewhere, into your body, into your timeline, into the people you draw near. You begin to curate your reality with reverence. You begin to walk as if the ground responds to your heartbeat. And in truth, it does. Because the all is not only the field in which you think. It is the presence that listens. It hears not your voice, but your frequency. Not your words, but your intention. And it reflects back not what you ask for, but what you are. This is the precision of the law. This is the kindness of the cosmos. And this is where your remembering begins to deepen. And as the remembering deepens, something ancient stirs. Not in your intellect, but beneath it. A pulse, a breath, a thread pulling you inward. Not backward, but before. Before the language. Before the forgetting. Before the you that learned to doubt the unseen. This is not discovery. It is exposure. The uncovering of what was always humming beneath your skin. You begin to realize that the true curriculum was never written in books. It was etched into your moments. Encoded in your choices, your patterns, your pain. Not as punishment, but as path. Because the mind does not simply reflect. It invites. It pulls experience toward itself, like light bending around a star. You felt it. That uncanny echo. The same situation reappearing in different disguises. The same story playing out with different names. Over and over until you listen. Until you stop reacting and start remembering. This isn't happening again. It's still happening. The thought that created it has not yet shifted. The vibration has not yet resolved. The Hermetists understood this. They never separated thought from consequence. To them, every moment of your life was the echo of a vibration once set in motion. This is karma. Not judgment, not fate, but vibrational feedback. And now it is returning not to harm you, but to show you. To offer you a mirror clear enough to see yourself beyond the surface. Beyond the identity. Beyond the mask. Because the mind you inherited, the loud one, the fearful one, the one filled with inherited programs and collective noise, is not the only one available to you. There is another, quieter, older. It does not speak in panic. It whispers in patterns. It remembers without thought. And when you begin to sit with that mind, the deep one, the sacred one, your perception begins to reassemble. Not instantly, but unmistakably. Colors seem richer. Words become symbols. Encounters feel charged. As if everyone you meet is playing out a role your soul requested. Because they are. And you are not helpless in this theater. You are the playwright. Every unconscious thought is a character given stage time. Every belief you hold too tightly becomes a scene that repeats. Every fear unexamined writes a subplot you didn't mean to tell. But when awareness returns, the script begins to change. You become deliberate. You become precise. And most importantly, you become curious. Because now, instead of resisting what shows up, you begin to inquire, what thought made this necessary? What vibration is asking to be transmuted? What story is longing to end, so a truer one can begin? And here is where creation shifts from survival to ceremony. You are no longer reacting. You are sculpting, not with force, but with frequency. Because the outer world does not need your control. It needs your coherence. That is the work. That is the magic. And that is where we go next. So you begin to listen, not with your ears, but with the stillness behind them. You listen for the pulse beneath form, for the tremor beneath the thought, for the first vibration that set it all in motion. And in that listening, you start to sense something. The world is not static. It is breathing with you. It is responding to you. It always has been. You were taught that change is hard. That reality is fixed. That life must be earned, fought for, proved. But this was never truth, it was hypnosis. A collective dream built from disconnected minds. Minds that forgot their origin, their reach, their song. Because thought is not an idea. It is a seed. And vibration is not a metaphor. It is the soil. What you feel repeatedly, what you believe consistently, what you whisper in silence becomes your harvest. Even when you don't mean it to. Even when you forgot you planted it. So no, you are not broken. You are blooming. Even when the flowers look like pain. Even when the fruit is bitter. It's not failure, it's feedback. It's a reminder. You have always been creating. You just forgot you were allowed to choose. And this is where you begin to take the throne. Not the throne of ego or control, but of responsibility. The Hermeticists did not teach passivity. They taught precision. The mind, properly trained, becomes a wand, a tuning fork, a lens. And when you train it not to obsess, but to observe, not to chase, but to anchor, you become a steward of vibration, a sculptor of timelines, a transmitter of new codes, not by wishing, but by becoming. You learn that the work is not to think better thoughts. The work is to become the frequency of the world you seek. If you desire peace, can your nervous system hum with stillness? If you desire love, can your heart remain open even as the old pain rises? If you desire freedom, can you unclench your grip on the past, on control, on certainty? Because vibration is not a fantasy. It is the deepest truth of matter. Atoms hum, light sings, energy responds, and you are made of that. The entire structure of your being is a choir of frequencies. Some inherited, some chosen, some asleep, some begging to be heard. So you listen again, not to the outer noise, but to the inner chord. You ask, what am I vibrating now? Not what I say, not what I show, but what I am. Because life is responding to that. Always, not occasionally, not if you meditate long enough or say the right affirmation. It responds every moment to the truth beneath your surface. And if that truth is fragmented, your life will feel like static. If it is coherent, your path begins to clear. People will call it luck, coincidence, synchronicity, but you will know. It is alignment. It is vibration. It is law. And the more you remember that, the less you chase and the more you allow. Not from passivity, but from power. From the knowing that you are not here to react. You are here to resonate, to embody, to emit. That is the key. And your hand has already begun to turn it. And as the key turns, the lock doesn't click open in thunder or light. It opens in silence, in softness, in the gentle realization that you were never outside the temple, only asleep within it. The Real Gate was never a wall but a frequency, and now you're beginning to match it. Not because you have learned enough, but because you've remembered enough to let go. Let go of chasing. Let go of control. Let go of the belief that reality is something distant, external, untouchable. Because now you feel it, the breath beneath form, the whisper behind events, the pulse in everything that speaks not in words, but in mirrors. You begin to see reality isn't random. It's rhythmic. It's harmonic. It bends toward coherence, toward the clearest signal. And that signal is you when you stop fracturing it with resistance. The Hermetists called it the law of correspondence. As within, so without. But this isn't poetry. It's instruction. It's not that the world copies your mind. It is your mind, stretched out in pattern, echoed in form. Everything you touch, meet, lose, or long for is a message from your own vibration, reflected, shaped, then returned. So when you ask why something is happening, ask also, what inside me called it forth? What belief? What emotion? What frequency has come home to be seen? Because the world isn't doing this to you. It's doing it for you, through you. And if you can hold that, even for a moment, you begin to shift from victim to vessel, from repetition to resonance. And you start to see the world not as an enemy, not even as a teacher, but as a mirror made of light. A mirror that loves you enough to never lie, even when the truth it reflects is difficult. Because pain, too, is feedback. It is the sound your vibration makes when it is out of tune with your truth. It is not punishment. It is tuning. The same way a musical note will shudder when it is off pitch, your life shakes when you're out of alignment. And the answer is not to silence the pain or decorate it with positive thoughts, but to listen to it deeply, to let it lead you back to the misaligned thought that created it, the pattern that keeps repeating, the frequency that still hums in shadow. Because when you find it, truly find it, you no longer need to fight it. You can transmute it. That is alchemy. Not gold from lead, but coherence from chaos. Light from distortion. And the tool is always thought, not the frantic kind, but the pure kind. The thought born of stillness. The thought that carries no demand, only resonance. You don't need to think your way into a new life. You need to feel your way into a new frequency. And from there, life will rearrange itself. It always does. Not because you forced it, because you matched it. And when your signal becomes clear, the world no longer resists. It reflects. And suddenly, the impossible becomes familiar. And the path that once felt hidden becomes obvious. Not because it changed, but because you did. And this is the quiet revolution. The shift that no one sees, but everyone feels. The moment you stop trying to bend the world and begin to listen to what your own energy has been broadcasting into it. The moment you become honest with yourself, not just about what you want, but about what you've been vibrating. Because desire alone does not create. Desire is the spark. But it is your frequency that sets the direction. You can want peace but vibrate chaos. You can speak love, but hum with fear. And the universe will not respond to the words. It will respond to the hum. This is why outcomes seem to contradict intentions. Why manifestations feel delayed, distorted, or denied. Because the broadcast isn't what you think. It's what you feel. What you believe even when you say otherwise. So the real work begins there, not in thinking harder but in attuning deeper. To sit inside the silence and listen for the old songs. The ones you didn't choose, the ones you absorbed. The frequencies of scarcity, of unworthiness, of needing to earn love, of expecting the fall before the flight. And you begin to feel them not as flaws, but as echoes. Echoes of a mind shaped by forgetting. Echoes ready to be heard, held, and finally changed. Because that is your power, not to fight the pattern, but to retune it. To bring your mind into harmony with the truth that always was, that you are already the field, already the frequency, already the doorway. This is the law the Hermetists guarded in silence. Not because it was fragile, but because it was sacred. Because it could not be understood by the mind that still believed itself separate from the source. And now you are beginning to remember. You see that vibration is not effort. It is state. It is presence. It is who you become when you stop pretending to be smaller than your soul. And as you soften into that, life shifts. Not in explosions, but in alignments. You think of someone and they call. You let go of striving and the answer arrives. You say no to what shrinks you, and something opens. A door, a connection, a moment that feels scripted by grace. These are not miracles. These are confirmations that your frequency has changed, and the field is responding in kind. This is not superstition. It is precision. It is the algorithm beneath form. And the more you trust it, the more you stop chasing and start embodying. You realize you don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. And what you are is becoming whole again. Wholeness doesn't roar. It doesn't arrive with lightning or applause. It comes in waves of recognition, in the soft dissolve of resistance, in the subtle moments where you no longer need to prove, to fix, to grasp. It comes when you look at your life, all of it, and see not mistakes but messages, not failure but frequency. Wholeness is remembering that you were never broken, only dissonant. Your soul never stopped singing. You just forgot how to hear it beneath the noise. And now, as the noise thins, the melody returns. It may begin as a hum, a flicker, a quiet feeling of alignment, a day where you no longer betray yourself to keep the peace. A choice that feels effortless because it matches your vibration, not your conditioning. And with every such moment, you build resonance. You become a tuning fork for the life that was always waiting, not ahead, but within. Because your reality is not waiting to be reached. It's waiting to be remembered, recalled through coherence, brought forth through frequency. This is the secret behind synchronicity, behind flow, behind what others call magic. It is not a gift given to the chosen. It is a reflection offered to the aligned. And alignment is not perfection. It is presence. It is honesty. It is willingness to let go of the noise and return to the signal of your truth. Not the one shaped by survival, the one born before the fear. And when you live from that signal, even for a day, the world adjusts. Not because you forced it, because you stopped interfering. This is the paradox. The less you try to control the outcome, the more it begins to reflect your essence. Because the signal clears. Because the distortion fades. because the field can finally respond to the real you, not the mask, not the version of you that seeks approval, not the one built to survive, but the soul that came here to transmit, to walk this world not as a reactor, but as a resonance, to let every word, step, silence, and gaze be encoded with coherence. And from that coherence, reality organizes, not just for you but around you. Others feel it, not in your words, but in your presence, not in what you say, but in what your vibration makes possible. Because the awakened mind is not loud, it's tuned, and its tuning changes rooms, relationships, timelines. This is the power they tried to make you forget, not because it was false but because it was real, too real to control, too simple to sell. But you're remembering, and that changes everything, because the power you're reclaiming was never external. It was never hidden in temples, scriptures, or the hands of masters on high. It was always this, the capacity to shape the field through thought, through intention, through vibration. This is not a poetic idea. It is the architecture of all creation, written into the subtle currents of your being. To say your thoughts create reality is to say you are not merely navigating a world, you are composing it. Moment by moment, belief by belief, the unseen sculpting the scene. But it isn't enough to think a thought. It must be infused, energized, aligned. Not every thought becomes matter. Only those that find coherence within you, that resonate fully mind, body, feeling, breath. Hermeticism teaches that the all, the supreme consciousness, does not think about the universe. It thinks the universe into being. And you, as a spark of that same all, are not excluded from this process. You are a node within it, a channel through which the one experiences itself, diversely, uniquely, beautifully. But here is where the confusion begins. Because you've been taught to believe that thought is something you do with effort, with direction, like mental labor. But the truth is deeper. Thought is not separate from being. You are always thinking, even in silence, especially in silence. Thought is not limited to words, its frequency, emotion, expectation, even your posture, your breath, your unconscious tensions, all of it speaks into the field. And the field, which is the mind of the all, is always listening. So the real question is not do you create your reality, but which part of you is doing the creating? Is it the part of you shaped by memory, trauma, programming? Is it the part that learned to fear, to shrink, to settle? Or is it the part that remembers, the inner sun that never went out, only dimmed beneath layers? Because when your surface mind is fractured, the signal is distorted. You broadcast from the frequency of fear, and then wonder why life reflects it back. But the field is not cruel. It is not punishing. It is exact. It gives you not what you wish for, but what you believe. And belief is not what you affirm out loud. It is what your nervous system accepts as safe, as true, as inevitable. This is why simply thinking positive doesn't change outcomes. Because if the subconscious still vibrates with doubt, with guilt, with resistance, that is the signal. That is the code the universe deciphers. Hermeticism doesn't teach you to manipulate the world. It teaches you to master yourself, to refine your inner instrument until your vibration becomes intentional, until thought is no longer reactive, but sacred, until every idea you hold is not a repetition, but a choice. So how do you begin? Not with grand gestures, not with fevered affirmations, but with awareness. You begin by watching your own mind like a sacred text. You listen not for logic, but for tone, for rhythm, for repetition. You track your emotional reactions, not to judge them, but to decode them. Because every trigger is a teacher. Every loop is a lesson unfinished. And every emotion is a vibration, asking for alignment or transmutation. This is the path of inner alchemy. You do not suppress the lower states, you raise them. You do not pretend the fear isn't there. You invite it into the light of conscious thought. And in doing so, its charge begins to dissolve. Imagine your mind like a temple. Thought is incense. Belief is the architecture. Emotion is the music echoing through its halls. What are you building breath by breath? What atmosphere are you maintaining, hour by hour? Most live with temples built by others, families, systems, religions, fears. But you now have the chance to become architect again. And it begins with one question. What vibration do I want to be the foundation of my life? Because once you know that, you stop reacting. You start tuning. And with every breath attuned to clarity, the world around you becomes less a battlefield and more a mirror. A teacher. A choir echoing the tone you've chosen. This is not passivity. This is mastery. The kind of mastery that doesn't need to dominate. Because it has already remembered, everything bends toward coherence. You don't force alignment. You become it. And as you do, the thoughts that once fragmented you begin to unify. The beliefs that once blocked you dissolve. And a new signal begins to rise. Steady, soft, undeniable. You are not here to chase your life. You are here to remember that you are already its source. And as this realization settles deeper, something shifts. Not in the world, not yet, but in your breath, your gaze, your stance in time. You are no longer reaching outward. You are drawing inward the power that was never outside of you to begin with. You begin to feel the subtle reversal of energy, not collapse, but return. A folding in of scattered fragments. A remembrance that your mind is not just a tool for thought, but a womb for form. Form is not separate from consciousness. That is the heresy of the modern age. That objects, events, and outcomes exist apart from awareness. But Hermeticism never forgot. The all thinks and therefore all things arise. Not linearly but vibrationally. Not mechanistically but coherently. So when your thoughts become aligned with soul, not ego, not programming, but soul, creation begins to move. Not in panic, not in haste, but with the elegance of natural law. Like a river carving its way through stone. Not because it fights, but because it flows in harmony with its nature. This is the essence of vibrational architecture. You don't build reality. You tune into the version that already exists at your frequency. All possibilities already exist. This is not metaphor, this is quantum mechanics. The field is not empty. It is dense with potential. And your frequency, your coherent, emotional, consistent frequency is the selector, the bridge, the navigator. When you hold a thought with your whole being, not just with words, but with breath, sensation, emotional charge, and embodied belief, you are choosing a version of reality. And that version begins to shape itself around you, like mist solidifying into form. This is why the Hermetic law of vibration follows immediately after the law of mentalism. Because thought alone is not sufficient. It must vibrate. It must carry weight in the invisible. And that weight is emotion. That weight is repetition. That weight is truth. The question is, what truth are you rehearsing? What frequency are you allowing to occupy your mental temple? Not the one you speak, but the one you feel in the quiet moments. When no one is watching. When nothing distracts you. When the only voice left is your own. This is where the real transformation begins. Not when you change your thoughts, but when you witness them without resistance. When you sit in stillness and see the programming for what it is. Old code written in moments of survival. Patterns inherited from ancestors who forgot their power. Words repeated by teachers who were afraid of their own light. And you now are the point of interruption. Not by force but by awareness. You are not here to escape the system. You are here to rewire it from within. Because as you transmute thought into clarity, and clarity into frequency, and frequency into coherence, reality must respond. It has no choice. It is law. Just like gravity does not care if you believe in it, neither does vibration. Neither does resonance. These forces respond not to your preferences, but to your alignment, your congruence, your embodied signal. And the more congruent you become, the less effort you need. Manifestation stops being an act of will and becomes a result of clarity. Your life stops feeling like resistance and starts becoming rhythm. Doors stop being knocked down and begin opening in silence. Because when you vibrate with truth, deep, unshakable truth, life organizes itself around you. People appear. Resources align. Paths clear. And it is not because you are special. It is because you are aligned. This is not mysticism. This is mechanics. This is the deep geometry of the soul. This is Hermetic law unfolding not in temples, but in your bloodstream, in your choices, in the quiet revolution of a coherent mind. So ask yourself now, what signal am I ready to stop repeating? What truth am I finally ready to vibrate into the field? Not with desperation, but with stillness. Because you are no longer speaking to the void. You are speaking to a living mind, the all. And it hears not your fear but your frequency. Not your noise but your resonance. And now, it begins to respond. And what it sends back is never random. This is the next law, the next veil lifting, the law of cause and effect. Not as punishment, not as morality, but as precision. A perfect response system within the mind of the all. A spiritual algorithm that never forgets, never guesses, never overlooks even the quietest intention. What you live today is not fate. It is the echo of thoughts you believed were forgotten. Emotions you thought had passed. Patterns you hoped had ended. But the universe has no amnesia. It is a perfect mirror, reflecting the vibration you most consistently hold. And this is not cruelty. It is kindness. Because without it, growth would be impossible. Without this feedback loop, how would the soul learn? How would you know when your signal is distorted? How would you ever discover what's living inside you if the world did not offer a mirror? So the law of cause and effect is not here to condemn you. It is here to wake you, to show you what part of your thought has taken form. And yes, sometimes that reflection is painful. Sometimes the life that surrounds you looks nothing like the life you believe you desire. But when that happens, the answer is not to panic. It is to look deeper, to ask, what seed did I plant, knowingly or not? What emotion have I been rehearsing beneath my smile? What thought did I let become belief and then reality? Because nothing happens without cause. Not your joy, not your heartbreak, not the way doors open or slam. All of it is the world responding to your broadcast. Not instantly, not in ways the linear mind can always track, but precisely, faithfully, lawfully. And the moment you recognize this, truly, deeply recognize it, the game changes. You are no longer at the mercy of external chaos. You are no longer caught in the illusion of randomness. You become the source of your reality, not its servant. This is the shift from passive manifestation to active creation. Not through control, but through alignment, through listening, through intentional causality. Because when you begin to plant with awareness, not just actions but thoughts, beliefs, emotions, the harvest begins to change. The field doesn't just reflect what you want. It reflects what you embody. And if your embodiment is clear, if your mind becomes unified, if your emotional signal matches your spoken truth, the field has no choice. It bends. It organizes. It reflects. This is not about perfection. It is about integrity, about congruence, about vibrational honesty. Because most people lie to themselves vibrationally. They say, I trust, but vibrate doubt. They say, I'm ready, but carry fear. They say, I deserve, but feel shame. And then wonder why the mirror shows something else. But the mirror cannot lie. It only shows you what you are. And this is the hidden gift. Once you understand that, you stop blaming. You stop projecting. You stop chasing symptoms and start shifting causes. You become a scientist of your own vibration. A mystic who knows that every repeated experience is an echo, and every echo has a source. That source is you. And this is not a burden, it is liberation. Because if you created this reality, then you can create another. If you wrote this chapter, you can write the next one differently. You can retune the thought, rewrite the belief, replant the cause. And when you do, even slightly, the effect begins to change. Not always instantly, but inevitably, because law never fails. Not when you resist it, and not when you align. So what are you choosing to plant now? In this breath? In this moment? Because your next moment is already listening, already forming, already rising in the unseen, preparing to become real. Not to test you, not to trap you, but to show you what you are, and to ask, Are you ready to become something new? And the question is no longer rhetorical. It vibrates now. It hovers in the space between your inhale and your next thought, alive with potential, waiting not for approval but for coherence. Are you ready to become something new? Not as an escape but as a return. To remember who you are beneath the noise. Beneath the identities that were layered over your essence like sediment, like dust. Because becoming new is not about adding more. It's about shedding, distilling, tuning yourself so precisely that only truth remains. And truth, as the Hermetists knew, is not a concept. It is a frequency. It is the only state that doesn't waver under pressure. This is why you may feel discomfort when you're out of alignment. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is trying to correct itself through you. This correction is the deeper rhythm. The law of rhythm. The pulse beneath form. Everything moves in cycles. Everything breathes, in and out, rise and fall, contraction and expansion. Life is not linear. It's wave, spiral, oscillation. And when you feel lost or regressing, it's not failure. It's the inward curve of the spiral. The moment before the next rise. Not the end, but the preparation. You are never going backward. You are circling deeper, returning to familiar ground from a higher vantage. What once broke you now merely stirs you. What once silenced you now sharpens you. The Hermetists called this the dance of the pendulum. And they knew, the more extreme the swing to one side, the more powerful the return. So if you're feeling the descent, know this, the ascent has already begun. But only if you don't resist the rhythm. Only if you remember, even your descent is sacred. Even your darkness is intelligent. Even your stillness is motion unseen. The modern world worships upward movement, constant production, endless light. But nature knows better. The seed begins in soil. The wave withdraws before it crashes. Winter is not death. It is integration. So too with your inner work. When nothing is happening, everything is happening. When you are empty, the field is preparing to fill you. But only with what you have made space for. Only with what your vibration now allows. And here again we return to thought. Because every phase of the rhythm, every rise and fall is shaped not by fate, but by frequency. If your inner world meets winter with fear, you freeze. If it meets winter with trust, you deepen. And when spring returns, your vibration writes the blueprint of what will grow. Not your effort. Not your effort. Your signal. So pause here. What rhythm are you resisting right now? What part of your life are you judging as wrong, broken, regressive, when it might just be the inward breath of something vast and sacred? Because when you learn to ride the wave, not fight it, you begin to dance with law itself. You no longer fear contraction. You meet it with stillness. You meet it with vision. This is the mastery the initiates held. To see all movement as sacred. To use every descent as a preparation for height. To meet every silence as the doorway to the next sound. And this is your invitation. Not to avoid the lows, but to harmonize with them. Not to panic in the quiet, but to listen more deeply. Because even the pendulum, when left undisturbed, finds stillness. And in that stillness, new vibration begins. A choice, a new thought, a resonance that will write the next cycle of your life. Choose carefully. You are not just responding to rhythm. You are shaping it. Then comes the moment you begin to see with both eyes, not just the eye that prefers, selects, resists, but the one that beholds. The eye that sees the dance of duality and does not flinch. That sees darkness not as an error, but as a necessary contrast. That understands. Without shadow, form cannot be seen. Without night, light loses meaning. This is the law of polarity, another of the Hermetic truths. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Love and fear. Joy and sorrow. Power and surrender. Every vibration has its mirror, and every mirror is one spectrum. You were taught to divide them, to choose one, to exile the other. But the soul remembers what the world forgets. Opposites are not enemies. They are reflections. Different notes on the same chord. And the more you resist one side, the more power it gains in shadow. Fear doesn't vanish because you suppress it. It transmutes when you meet it. Pain doesn't dissolve when you distract from it. It integrates when you allow it to speak. Every emotion, even the uncomfortable ones, is energy. Every thought, even the unwelcome ones, is vibration. And vibration doesn't disappear. It only waits until it can be met, felt, transmuted. Polarity is not a flaw in the universe. It's the mechanism through which change becomes possible. Without opposition, there is no evolution. Without tension, there is no movement. Without contrast, your consciousness would have no texture, no color, no path. So what if the things you've called negative were actually invitations? What if anxiety was the signal of a truth unlived? What if jealousy was the voice of a gift you haven't owned yet? What if anger was sacred fire, asking to burn through illusion? Not every dark emotion is to be obeyed, but none are to be exiled without listening. This is the inner alchemy the Hermetists knew. To turn fear not into silence, but into awareness. To meet shame not with hiding, but with breath. To hold grief not as a failure of spirit, but as proof of depth. Because here's what polarity teaches, when you're finally ready to learn it. Nothing is what it appears to be on the surface. Every negative contains its seed of medicine. Every positive contains its own shadow to be watched, honored, refined. Love can turn into attachment if untended. Courage can become recklessness. Stillness can become avoidance. Even light can blind. The wise do not cling to one side and resist the other. They learn to move like breath between poles. They do not fear sadness. They do not idolize happiness. They seek wholeness, the place where both are seen and something deeper emerges. Polarity only creates suffering when you forget that you are not the pole. You are the axis between them, the center from which both rise, the still point from which opposites find meaning. This is why the great sages appeared so calm. Not because life never shook them, but because they learned how to swing with the pendulum without losing their center. So ask yourself now, what emotion have you labeled as bad? What experience do you judge as wrong? What part of yourself have you exiled into silence? What if those were doors? What if those were unclaimed gifts? What if, right now, the parts of you you've run from were simply waiting to be reintegrated? Because you cannot create reality by clinging only to the light. You create when you embrace the whole spectrum and choose to vibrate from the center, steady, conscious, and whole. This is not indulgence. This is mastery, the kind that softens you and sharpens you, the kind that humbles you and makes you invincible. Because when nothing within you is exiled, nothing outside you can unseat your peace. And from that peace, true creation begins. And now that you know creation begins not in light or shadow, but in the union of both, you begin to move differently. You are no longer pulled by impulse, nor paralyzed by judgment. You start to recognize the field not as a battleground of opposites, but as a living spectrum, a wave that flows not between good and bad, but between density and clarity, between contraction and expansion. This is the maturing of consciousness, when you stop chasing only one side of the spectrum and begin to work with all of it. To move with what is, to align with rhythm instead of resisting it. And this brings us to another sacred key, the law of gender, or rather, the law of polarity in motion. Every vibration, every field, every thought contains within it both masculine and feminine aspects. Not man and woman, but active and receptive, penetrating and holding, electric and magnetic. In the Hermetic tradition, gender is not biology. It is metaphysical architecture. The masculine principle is direction. It initiates. The feminine principle is presence. It receives and gestates. Both are required for creation. A thought is masculine. A feeling that receives and anchors it is feminine. An intention is masculine. The stillness that allows it to unfold is feminine. To act is masculine. To embody is feminine. And without the balance of both, manifestation fragments. This is why so many modern attempts at manifestation fail. Too much force, not enough space. Too much effort, not enough allowing. Too many declarations, not enough listening. People push their desires into the void, never realizing that creation requires conception. not just command. You cannot impregnate the field with will alone. The field responds to presence, to coherence, to surrender that is not weakness but intelligence. This is the high magic of inner gender balance. When your inner masculine is clear, not frantic. When your inner feminine is receptive, not passive. When your thought becomes intention, and your body becomes the vessel that nurtures it. Most people have wounded one side, a masculine principle distorted by over-control, urgency, rigidity, a feminine principle weakened by suppression, fear, people-pleasing, or shame. But when you begin to remember both within yourself, your reality responds not with chaos, but with precision. Because now you are no longer creating from fragment. You are creating from wholeness. And the field, the great mind of the all, responds to wholeness like a mirror meeting its source. It reflects exactly what you have become. Not what you wish, not what you fake, but what you truly embody. In rhythm, in presence, in polarity. So ask now, where is your masculine overworking to prove your worth? Where is your feminine hiding from receiving what you've asked for? What belief are you forcing instead of trusting? What desire are you holding so tightly that the field cannot breathe into it? What if creation isn't loud? What if it's not another vision board or mantra or midnight panic? What if it's breath? One held in clarity, released in trust. What if it's stillness? Not as emptiness, but as invitation. What if it's this very moment? You remembering not how to make things happen, but how to let the version of reality you've already chosen reach you. This is the silent brilliance of balanced polarity. It doesn't chase. It allows. It doesn't wait. Prepares. It doesn't plead. It listens. And from that listening, the next thought comes. Not forced, not fearful, but fertile. And in that thought lives the vibration of your next reality. Already forming. Already alive. Already yours. Because once you've balanced the poles within, once you've tasted the stillness that receives without passivity and the clarity that acts without domination, you begin to walk differently in the world. Not ahead of life, not behind it, but with it. In step. In rhythm. You no longer try to force open doors, nor shrink back when they appear. You understand what is meant for you vibrates toward you, and what is not will never harmonize no matter how hard you grasp. Now you begin to trust vibration not as a theory, but as a language. You feel it in your body before you see it in form. You sense alignment before outcome. You choose based not on logic, but on resonance. And that changes everything. Because vibration is not metaphor, it is architecture. It is the blueprint of all structure. It is the scaffolding that holds reality together, from subatomic to celestial. The ancients knew this long before our machines could measure it. In Egypt, they tuned temples to planetary harmonics. In Vedic science, they mapped mantras to organs. In Atlantis, yes, even there, sound was not entertainment. It was technology. Crystals were tuned to heal, to store memory, to channel frequency. What if your body is one such instrument? What if your nervous system is a receiver of higher thought? What if the pain you feel is not a flaw, but feedback, telling you that your vibration has drifted from truth? Modern science is just beginning to catch up. Quantum physics now confirms what mystics always whispered, that observation affects outcome, that energy fields encode information, that reality is less substance and more signal. Even your DNA doesn't function as static code. It responds to frequency, to emotional environment, to coherent thought. This means the mind isn't just where thoughts happen. It is where worlds are born. And not just your mind, but your field. The electromagnetic halo around your body. The radiance of your intention and emotion. The part of you that reaches before you enter a room. That vibrates ahead of your words. That draws experiences like magnets. Long before you make anything happen. This is where the Hermetic path leads. To full responsibility and profound liberation. Because if your thoughts create reality, not just with force but with frequency, then every moment is an act of creation. Every belief you hold is a blueprint being built into the world. Every feeling you indulge is a broadcast to the all. a silent command shaping the forms around you. And the field always responds. Not because it favors you, not because it owes you, but because it cannot not respond. This is law. And when you remember this, you stop bargaining. You stop waiting for signs. You stop asking the world to change. You ask, what have I been vibrating? Not yesterday, now, not what you wish to be, but what you are. The emotion humming in your chest, the thought repeating in your breath, the story you hold as inevitable, because that story is writing the next page. That thought is echoing into form. That signal is shaping who and what finds you. So pause. What do you want to meet you in the next moment? What version of life do you want to become undeniable? Then ask, what thought will I choose now to match it? What feeling will I breathe into to become it? Because the future is not a distance. It is a frequency, and you here now are the dial. Then it returns, that ancient ache, not of pain but of memory. The pull you couldn't name, the restlessness that no goal satisfied. The sense that something vital was missing, not from the world, but from yourself. And you begin to realize, it wasn't missing. It was buried. Not lost but layered beneath time, language, logic. Beneath the noise of modern life. Beneath the script you were given and told to play. And now, as your signal clears, as your thoughts grow quieter and truer, it begins to rise. Not new knowledge, old memory. Memory that predates this body, this name, this century. Memory of being vast, of being whole, of creating with precision, not effort, of vibrating a world into existence and walking within it like a lucid dream. Perhaps you called it a fantasy before, or myth, or longing, but it was never fiction. It was recognition, because this isn't your first awakening. It is a continuation, a return. You've been here before, not on this street, not in this skin, but on this path. The path of remembrance, the path of vibration, the path of creative consciousness reclaiming itself from sleep. Somewhere in your field is the residue of Atlantis, not the city but the state. The frequency of a time when humanity remembered. When we built not from ego, but from alignment. When technology was not a distraction, but an extension of thought. When sound healed. When geometry instructed. When the inner and outer were not divided, but in rhythm. You didn't read about this. You felt it. In symbols that called to you. In crystals that stirred you. In voices that echoed in dreams you never told anyone about. Not because you were making it up, but because part of you never forgot. The Atlantean consciousness is not a history. It is a frequency. And those who once walked in its light are returning. Not as rulers, but as reminders. If this speaks to you, not to your logic but to your bones, then you are likely one of them. A soul that encoded truth within itself, waiting for the time to rise again. And the time is now. You are not here to rebuild Atlantis. You are here to embody its essence without the fall. To create from alignment, not ambition. To harmonize with the field, not conquer it. To remember that reality responds not to hierarchy, but to coherence. You do not need to announce yourself. You do not need a title, a robe, a following. Your frequency speaks louder than anything else ever could. And the more you remember, the more others will feel it, even if they can't explain why. Because this remembering isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It resonates. It ripples. It activates. You are not here to convince. You are here to embody. To walk in the world with such clarity, such alignment, that the field around you begins to shift, effortlessly, inevitably. And this shift is not just personal. It is planetary. Every mind that remembers becomes a tuning fork for others. Every soul that awakens vibrates into the collective field a new permission to be vast again. So now, at this point in the spiral, you are not only shaping your reality. You are participating in a greater symphony. You are remembering not just for yourself, but for all those who forgot with you. The elders called this the time of return, when the ancient seeds would bloom again, when those who had kept the codes in silence would begin to speak. Not in dogma, not in systems, but in frequency, in presence, in truth that has no opposite. So listen, Not with your ears, but with your field. What do you feel awakening in you now? What inner resonance is growing too strong to suppress? You are not imagining this. You are re-entering it. The world is changing because you are changing. And what's coming next is not a reward. It's a reflection of who you've remembered yourself to be. And as the remembering deepens, it becomes undeniable. Not because of signs in the sky or miraculous events, but because of the growing silence inside you, the steadiness, the calm clarity that no longer needs proof. You stop waiting for the world to change. You start noticing that it already has. Subtly, radically, in your very breath. There's no trumpet to mark the shift. Just the sense that life feels different now. Not softer, not easier, but more real, more transparent, more responsive. The veil is thinner. The gap between thought and manifestation is shrinking. What you feel becomes what you see. What you fear returns to be transmuted. What you love appears before you finish asking. You've stepped into the phase of vibrational immediacy, where time bends and intention magnetizes with speed. This is not reward. It is resonance. It is what happens when your internal signal is no longer fragmented. When your thought, emotion, and embodiment vibrate in the same chord. And it's here, at this final threshold, that you begin to grasp the deepest truth. You are not just a part of creation. You are the conscious edge of it. The universe does not simply reflect you. It extends through you. Your mind is not inside your body. Your body is inside your consciousness. You are not in the world. The world is in you. This is not philosophy. It is lived reality once your signal clears. And so now the last layer begins to fall away. The idea that you must wait. Wait to be ready. Wait for signs. Wait to be approved or certified or allowed. But who now could grant permission for something you were born to remember? You are not here to seek power. You are here to return to essence. And from that essence, create in a way that is effortless because it is true. No more pretending. No more shrinking. No more manifesting from wounded urgency. Now only embodiment. Now only alignment. Now the sacred stillness from which all becomes possible. And in that stillness, the final thought arises. I am not waiting for the future. I am vibrating it now. This is the completion, not of the journey, but of the forgetting. And from this point, life no longer happens to you. It happens through you. And more, it begins to happen as you. You are the thought. You are the field. You are the reality remembering itself. And if something stirred within you, not just understanding, but remembrance. If these words didn't just inform, but vibrated, leave your mark in the field. Let others feel your signal. Comment, I feel the hum. Let your presence activate those still remembering. And subscribe to continue the journey. Deeper, clearer, together. What began here is only the beginning. Your thoughts are no longer private. They are frequency, and they are being felt.